My sister told me to pack my bags and go to a hostel for the summer so her squad could take my bedroom. My parents sat there and let her say it. I looked at them and thought, how did my family become so comfortable giving orders in my house? The morning sun was just starting to filter through the large bay windows of my coastal home. I was sitting on the cedar deck, a mug of dark roast coffee warming my hands, listening to the rhythm of the waves crashing against the rocks below. I had spent 5 years working 60-hour weeks as a marine logistics coordinator, tracking cargo ships across the globe, surviving on cold takeout and sheer willpower to afford this $1,200,000 piece of peace. It was my sanctuary. Then, the sliding glass door shrieked open. My 23-year-old sister, Vesper, stepped out onto the deck. She was wearing a silk robe that I was pretty sure belonged to me, her phone gripped in one hand like a lifeline. She did not say good morning. She did not look at the ocean view. She marched right up to my small patio table, slapped a glossy, brightly colored brochure down next to my coffee mug, and crossed her arms. "You need to clear out by the weekend," Vesper said. Her voice was flat, carrying that unmistakable tone of someone who was entirely used to getting whatever she wanted. "My friends are flying in on Monday to shoot some summer vlog content. We need your master suite to set up the lighting and the main studio space. You can stay here." I looked down at the brochure. It was for a cheap, crammed youth hostel down by the noisy tourist boardwalk, the kind of place that smelled like stale beer and broken dreams. I stared at the cheap paper, then back up at my sister. The sheer audacity of her demand hung in the salty morning air, thick and suffocating. "Are you out of your mind?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. Before Vesper could launch into her defense, my parents wandered out onto the deck. My father, Gideon, a retired city building inspector, was scratching his stomach, while my mother, Rowena, carried her herbal tea. They settled into the lounge chairs I had meticulously picked out, the ones I paid $2,000 for, and sighed in comfort. Rowena looked at me, her eyes soft and pleading in that manipulative way she had perfected over decades. "Just bear with it, Althea. Your sister is trying to build her career. You know how important her social media presence is right now. It is just for the summer. She is building a career by kicking me out of the house I own?" I shot back, the anger bubbling in my chest like hot tar. Gideon waved a dismissive hand, not even looking away from the seagull he was watching. "Don't make a big deal out of nothing, Althea. You work all day anyway. You barely use that big room. Family helps family. Family helps family." The phrase echoed in my mind, a bitter, twisted joke. If you were a fly on the wall, you would think I was the ungrateful teenager refusing to do chores, not a 28-year-old homeowner being evicted from her own property by her guests. Because that is exactly what they were. Guests. 6 months ago, they had called me in a panic. The basement of their suburban house had flooded due to a burst pipe, they claimed. The repairs would take weeks, maybe a month. They begged me to let them stay in my guest rooms just until the smell of mold cleared out. I hesitated, remembering every slight, every moment of being the invisible older sister. But I let them in. I opened my doors to the people who had never once opened their wallets or their hearts for me. 2 weeks turned into 2 months. 2 months morphed into half a year. The contractor delays were always vague, the excuses always shifting. And slowly, like a creeping rot, they took over my sanctuary. It did not happen all at once. Toxic family dynamics never do. It started with small encroachments. Rowena rearranged my kitchen cabinets because she did not like where I kept the spices. Gideon started parking his heavy truck in my designated spot, forcing me to park down the street. But Vesper was the worst. I remembered coming home exhausted from a brutal shift coordinating a delayed freight shipment from Rotterdam. I walked into my living room, craving nothing but silence and the comfort of my custom leather sofa. It was a $4,000 Italian leather couch, the first real piece of furniture I had ever bought brand new. When I turned on the lights, I froze. Vesper was sprawled across it, fast asleep. But that was not the problem. The problem was the dark, rust-colored stains smeared across the pristine cream leather. She had applied a cheap, sticky fake tan lotion and had not bothered to put a towel down. The chemical smell in the air was nauseating. I woke her up, furious, demanding to know what she had done. She just rolled her eyes, groaning about how I was ruining her sleep cycle. When Gideon came out of the guest room, I pointed at the ruined leather, my hands shaking. "Look at this," I demanded. "She ruined a $4,000 sofa." Gideon barely glanced at it. He looked at me with immense annoyance. "Grab a wet wipe, Althea. Stop yelling. Vesper is busy editing her photos. She doesn't have time to scrub furniture right now. It is just a couch. You make plenty of money, you can buy another one." I ended up on my hands and knees at 2 in the morning, scrubbing at the stains with specialized leather cleaner, tears of sheer frustration burning my eyes. They did not see my house as a home. They saw it as a free hotel, and they treated me like the unpaid maid. And now, they wanted to downgrade me from the maid to an exile. I looked at Vesper, who was now scrolling through her phone, entirely unbothered by the fact that she had just demanded I move to a hostel. I looked at my parents, who were sipping their drinks on my deck, breathing my air, enjoying the life I had built with my own blood and sweat. They thought I would cave. They thought I would always be the quiet, obedient punching bag they had molded me to be. But as I stared at the hostel brochure fluttering in the wind, something inside me snapped. A cold, hard realization settled in my bones. I was not going to pack my bags. I was going to pack theirs. But I needed a plan. To understand why my sister's demand was not just annoying, but deeply, violently insulting, you have to understand the museum of pain that was my childhood. My family did not just favor Vesper. They worshipped at the altar of her existence, while I was treated as a convenient afterthought, a background character in the movie of her life. I walked back into the house, leaving them on the deck. I moved through the hallway, my fingers trailing against the cool plaster of the walls I had painted myself. Every step I took felt heavy with the ghosts of past betrayals. I opened the door to my home office. Or rather, what used to be my home office. This room was supposed to be my quiet space. I had a heavy oak desk, a wall of bookshelves, and a display case for my vintage model ships. Building those ships was my therapy. It took hundreds of hours, tweezers, magnifying glasses, and endless patience to rig the tiny sails and glue the intricate wooden planks. They were my pride. Now, the room smelled like cheap perfume and aerosol hairspray. Vesper had decided the guest room closet was too small for her expanding wardrobe of fast fashion hauls. Without asking, she had hauled 2 massive metal clothing racks into my office. My desk was buried under piles of tangled necklaces, unopened PR packages, and discarded shoes. But the real gut punch was the corner where my display case used to stand. It was gone. In its place was a ridiculous ring light and a pink velvet chair. Panic gripped my throat. I tore through the room, tossing aside her cheap synthetic dresses, searching frantically. I found them in the garage 2 days later, stuffed into a black heavy-duty trash bag. The delicate masts of my Spanish galleon were snapped in half. The rigging of the clipper ship was tangled and torn. Hundreds of hours of my life, crushed and thrown out like garbage, simply because Vesper needed better lighting for her makeup tutorials. When I confronted Rowena about it, she had just sighed. "They were just toys, Althea. They were gathering dust. Vesper needed the space for her brand. You need to stop being so selfish." Selfish. That was their favorite word for me. I sat down on the edge of Vesper's pink velvet chair, the broken pieces of my past flashing before my eyes. The word selfish echoed back to my high school graduation. I had graduated top of my class. I had earned a full academic scholarship, the only reason I was able to go to college at all. I had saved up for months working at a diner to buy a beautiful emerald green dress for the ceremony. My parents had promised to take me out for a nice dinner afterward to celebrate. I was standing in the living room, holding my valedictorian plaque, waiting. And waiting. Then, a blood-curdling scream erupted from the upstairs bathroom. Vesper, who was 14 at the time, had slammed her finger in the drawer and broken her acrylic nail. She was sobbing hysterically, screaming that her hand was disfigured, that her life was ruined. My parents flew up the stairs in a panic. They spent the next 3 hours icing her finger, feeding her ice cream, and comforting her. They never came back downstairs. They never took me to dinner. I ended up driving myself to a fast food drive-thru in my emerald green dress, eating cold fries in the parking lot alone, staring at my valedictorian plaque in the passenger seat. But the financial betrayals were always the deepest. When I was 20, I had been working 60 hours a week, pulling double shifts at a logistics warehouse, organizing shipping containers in the freezing cold. I lived on ramen noodles and instant coffee. I managed to save $15,000. It was my emergency fund, my ticket to eventually buying a small starter home. I had kept it in a joint savings account that my mother had set up for me when I was a teenager, a mistake I would regret for the rest of my life. One Tuesday, I went to the ATM to withdraw $20 for gas. The machine flashed an insufficient funds error. My heart stopped. I ran into the bank branch, panicked, asking the teller to check my balance. 0. I drove to my parents' house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I pulled into the driveway, there was a shiny, lightly used red convertible sitting there. Vesper was posing next to it, laughing, while Gideon took photos. I confronted my mother in the kitchen, demanding to know where my money was. Rowena did not even look guilty. She continued chopping vegetables for a salad. "We borrowed it, Althea," she said casually. Vesper needed a reliable car for her college commute. "The bus is too dangerous for a pretty young girl like her. We will pay you back eventually." They never paid me back a single dime. The $15,000 vanished into Vesper's social life, her gas tank, her endless vanity. When I cried and screamed that it was my life savings, Gideon had threatened to kick me out of the house for being disrespectful to my mother. I moved out the next day, sleeping on a friend's couch for 3 months until I could afford a cheap studio apartment. I had built my empire from the ground up, entirely alone. Every brick, every plank of wood in this coastal house was paid for by the sweat they never cared to see. I stood up from the velvet chair in my ruined office. I had tolerated their presence for 6 months because a pathetic, buried part of me still craved my parents' approval. I thought maybe, if I showed them how successful I had become, if I provided for them when they needed help, they would finally look at me and say they were proud. But they were not proud. They were just hungry. I had endured it all. The ruined graduation, the stolen $15,000, the destroyed model ships. But demanding I leave my own house so Vesper could play pretend with her influencer friends? I had gritted my teeth and endured because I thought they would leave soon. But what I did not know was that they were hatching a plan to drain the most valuable thing I owned. I was done being the victim. The Museum of Pain was officially closed to the public. The true limits of human patience are rarely tested by a single explosion. They are eroded, slowly, by 1,000 tiny cuts. By Thursday afternoon, my patience was not just eroded, it was a barren wasteland. I was working from the kitchen island, furiously typing an email to a port authority in Singapore, trying to reroute a delayed shipment of electronics. I had deliberately chosen the kitchen because the Wi-Fi signal was strongest, and because I wanted to keep an eye on my surroundings. The front door banged open, and loud, obnoxious laughter echoed through the hallway. Vesper walked in, trailed by her best friend and self-appointed assistant, Unia. Unia was 23, wore entirely too much glitter, and had a voice that sounded like a fork scraping against a ceramic plate. She was practically living at my house at this point, constantly hyping Vesper up and treating me like the hired help. "Oh my God, the lighting in the guest bathroom is so bad," Unia complained loudly, dropping a massive designer tote bag right onto my polished granite countertop, missing my laptop by inches. "How do you even do your skincare routine in here, Vesp?" "I know, right?" Vesper sighed dramatically. "That is why we need the master suite. The natural light in there is flawless. We are moving my stuff in on Sunday." They talked over me as if I were a piece of furniture. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. I closed my laptop slowly, took a deep breath, and walked over to the refrigerator. I had spent 2 hours the night before meal prepping. I had made a beautiful, healthy quinoa and grilled chicken salad with a homemade lemon vinaigrette, packed neatly in a glass container for my late shift at the office. I opened the fridge. My container was gone. I turned around. Unia was sitting at my dining table, peeling the lid off my glass container. Without asking, without a shred of hesitation, she stabbed a fork into my carefully prepared lunch and shoved a massive bite into her mouth. I stared at her, genuinely stunned by the sheer lack of manners. "Excuse me," I said, my voice tight. "That is my lunch." Unia chewed with her mouth open, making a face. She swallowed and looked at me dismissively. "Oh, my bad." Vesper said I could grab whatever was in the fridge. "To be honest, it is kind of bland. Do you have any ranch dressing? This vinaigrette is way too acidic." She insulted my cooking while stealing my food in my own house. I looked at Vesper, expecting some sort of apology or intervention. Vesper just shrugged, opening a bottle of sparkling water. "Don't be weird about food, Althea. It is just chicken. I'll buy you a sandwich later or something." I grabbed the glass container right out from under Unia's fork, ignoring her indignant gasp, and dumped the entire contents into the garbage disposal. I flipped the switch, letting the loud grinding noise drown out their complaints. Before I could turn around to kick Unia out, Gideon lumbered into the kitchen. He was holding a piece of paper, his face flushed red with irritation. He slammed it down on the kitchen island next to my laptop. "Explain this, Althea," he demanded. I looked down. It was the monthly electricity bill I had printed out earlier. The total circled in red was $800. For a single woman living alone, my bill rarely exceeded $150. But with Vesper running the central air conditioning at 65 degrees with the windows open, leaving every light on in the house, and Gideon running his massive power tools in the garage all day for his hobby projects, the energy consumption had skyrocketed. "Explain what?" I asked coldly. "It is the electric bill. It has quintupled since you all moved in. I was going to ask you to contribute this month." Gideon scoffed, a harsh, ugly sound. He crossed his thick arms over his chest. "Contribute? We are guests in this house. The pipes at our place are still completely ruined. You know we are struggling with the contractor fees. And here you are, making a six-figure salary, harassing your own father over a few pennies. You make so much money, why do you care about a few spare change dollars? Family comes first, Althea. You need to stop being so greedy." Greedy. They stole my $15,000, ruined my $4,000 couch, drank my coffee, ate my food, spiked my bills to $800, and called me greedy. The gaslighting was so intense it made my vision blur. $800 is not pennies, Dad, I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. And the contractor you hired told me last week that the basement has been dry for 2 months. You're dragging out the cosmetic repairs because you like living here rent-free. Gideon's face darkened. He hated being caught in a lie. "You listen to me, young lady," he snarled, pointing a thick finger at my face. "You do not speak to me like that under any roof. You have no respect. No wonder you are sitting here alone with no husband and no family of your own. You push everyone away with your horrible attitude." He turned and stormed out of the kitchen, marching back to his guest room. Vesper and Unia exchanged a look of smug satisfaction, whispering to each other as they headed toward the living room to film whatever nonsense they were planning for the day. I stood alone in the kitchen. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so pure and cold it felt like ice water in my veins. Later that evening, the house was relatively quiet. Vesper and Unia had gone out to a trendy bar downtown, using the secondary credit card I had stupidly given Vesper for groceries and emergencies months ago. My parents were asleep. I walked into the living room to turn off the lights Vesper had inevitably left on. On the coffee table, her iPad was sitting out, the screen lighting up with a notification. I normally would never invade someone's privacy, but the sheer entitlement I had witnessed today pushed me over the edge. I walked over and tapped the screen. She had left her messaging app open. It was a group chat titled Summer Villa Squad. There were 6 members in it. I scrolled up slightly. What I read made my stomach drop out of my body. Vesper had not just invited her friends over for a casual summer visit. She was actively monetizing my property. Message from Vesper: "Hey girls. The beach villa is fully secured for the whole summer. Natural lighting, private beach access, the works. Just a reminder, The buy-in for the summer stay is $1,500 per person. Send it to my Venmo by Friday so I can get the VIP welcome baskets ready. Message from friend 1, sent. So excited. What about your sister though? Won't she be annoying? Message from Vesper, ugh, don't worry about the troll. My parents are handling her. They promised to bully her into staying at some cheap hostel by the boardwalk. She is totally spineless, she will cave. The whole house is ours starting Monday. I stared at the glowing screen. $1,500 per person. 5 friends. She was collecting $7,500 to rent out a house she did not own, while actively plotting with my parents to mentally abuse me until I abandoned my own property. They did not just disrespect me. They were running a scam operation inside my living room. I gently placed the iPad back down on the table exactly as I found it. I did not scream. I did not cry. I walked up the stairs to my master suite, locked the door behind me, and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. I had been playing defense for 28 years. It was time to go on the offensive. The next morning, a Friday, the air in the house felt heavy, charged with the kind of static electricity that precedes a violent thunderstorm. I woke up before my alarm, my mind racing with the calculations of logistics, the same way I mapped out complex shipping routes. But this time, the cargo was my dignity, and the destination was absolute control. I went downstairs to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and waited. I knew they would make their move today. Vesper needed to secure the house before her paying guests arrived on Monday. Sure enough, at exactly 8 in the morning, Rowena walked into the kitchen. She was dressed in her usual flowy, bohemian clothes, carrying a folder. She had that soft, maternal smile plastered on her face, the one she used right before she plunged a knife into my back. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with artificial honey. "Did you sleep well?" "I slept fine, mother," I replied, leaning against the counter, taking a slow sip of my coffee. I did not offer her a mug. She set the folder down on the granite island and opened it. Inside was a single, neatly printed document. It looked official, formatted with heavy black text and lines for signatures at the bottom. "Your father and I were talking last night," Rowena began, sighing as if she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. "We know things have been tense lately. We know you feel a little overwhelmed with all of us here." I raised an eyebrow but remained silent. Let her dig the hole. "Vesper has a massive opportunity right now," Rowena continued, tapping her perfectly manicured fingernail against the paper. "A huge lifestyle brand wants to sponsor her summer content, but they need to see that she has a stable, luxurious location for the shoots. They need proof of residence for insurance purposes. So, we had a lawyer friend draft this up." She slid the paper toward me. I looked down. It was titled Temporary Transfer of Occupancy and Management Rights. I read through the legal jargon quickly. My logistics job required me to read through dense Port Authority contracts every single day. I knew exactly what I was looking at. This was not a simple proof of residence. This document, if signed, would legally grant Vesper the rights of a primary tenant for the next 6 months. It would give her the legal authority to dictate who lived in the house, manage the locks, and essentially treat the property as her own rental business. If I signed this, I would legally need to give her a formal eviction notice to get her out, a process that could take months in this state. They were trying to legally steal my house. "It is just a formality, Althea," Rowena coaxed, her voice soft and soothing. "It just shows the sponsor that Vesper is in charge of the location for the summer. It doesn't mean anything. You just sign on the bottom line, and then you can pack a few bags and head to that nice hostel for a few weeks. Think of it as a vacation for yourself. You work too hard." I looked up from the paper. I looked at the woman who gave birth to me. For the first time in my life, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no desperate yearning for her love. The emotional cord that tied me to her snapped, clean and final. They did not see me as a daughter. They saw me as a resource to be mined, an obstacle to be manipulated, a bank with a cleaning function. "A temporary transfer of management rights," I read aloud, my voice echoing in the quiet kitchen. So Vesper can secure a sponsorship. Exactly. Rowena beamed, clapping her hands together slightly. See? I knew you would understand. You are always the smart, practical one in the family. I am practical, I agreed slowly. I picked up the document. Rowena held out a silver pen, her eyes gleaming with greedy anticipation. I took the paper in both hands and, with a swift, sharp motion, ripped it right down the middle. Rowena gasped, stumbling back a step, her eyes wide with shock. Althea, what are you doing? That is a legal document. It is garbage, I said calmly, tearing the pieces again and dropping the confetti onto the granite counter. And so is the lie you just told me. There is no brand sponsorship, Mother. I read Vesper's iPad last night. I know she is charging her friends $1,500 a head to treat my home like a cheap resort. I know you and Dad promised to bully me out of my own master bedroom. Rowena's face drained of color. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish suffocating on dry land. The sweet, maternal facade melted away, revealing the panicked, calculating woman underneath. You snooped through your sister's private device? Rowena stammered, trying to pivot the blame onto me. That is a severe violation of privacy, Althea. How dare you? How dare I? I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. You are standing in the house I bought, handing me a fraudulent document to steal my legal rights so your golden child can run an illegal subletting scam, and you are worried about screen privacy? We are your family, Rowena yelled, dropping the act completely. We raised you. You owe us. I owe you nothing, I stated, my voice as hard as the granite counter. I paid my debt when I let you live here for 6 months rent-free. I paid my debt when you stole my $15,000. The bank is officially closed. I turned my back on her, picked up my laptop bag, and headed for the front door. I had a meeting to get to, and it was not at the logistics office. If you were in my shoes, you would probably scream in their faces, right? You would throw their luggage into the yard and call the police. I did not do that. Loud anger is for the weak. I prefer the quiet silence of a hurricane about to make landfall. I drove straight into the city, the coastal road winding along the cliffs. The ocean looked gray and turbulent today, perfectly matching my mood. I did not go to my office at the shipping company. Instead, I pulled into the polished underground garage of a high-end corporate building in the financial district. I took the elevator to the 15th floor and walked into the sleek, glass-walled reception area of Sterling and Hayes, a premier real estate law firm. I approached the receptionist. Althea to see Cashin, I said. Cashin was an old college friend. While I was pulling double shifts at the warehouse, he was studying for the bar exam in the library booth next to me. We bonded over cheap coffee and mutual exhaustion. Now, he was a ruthless, brilliant property lawyer and the only person I trusted to handle this mess legally and decisively. Cashin stepped out of his office, adjusting his expensive tie, and smiled warmly. He ushered me into his spacious office, closing the heavy oak door behind us, shutting out the noise of the city. Althea, he said, pouring me a glass of sparkling water. It has been too long. Though, given the frantic tone of your text message this morning, I assume this isn't a social call. I sat down in the leather guest chair, taking a deep breath. The contrast between Cashin's professional, ordered environment and the toxic chaos of my house was jarring. I spent the next 20 minutes laying out exactly what had been happening over the last 6 months. I told him about the ruined furniture, the escalating bills, the fake tan, the stolen $15,000 from the past, the text messages on the iPad, and finally, the fraudulent document Rowena had tried to force me to sign that morning. Cashin listened silently, his expression shifting from friendly concern to cold, professional outrage. He took meticulous notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, the room was quiet for a long moment. They are trying to establish squatters' rights, or at the very least, a verbal tenancy agreement that would require a formal, 60 to 90-day eviction process, Cashin explained, tapping his pen against the desk. If you had signed that paper, you would have handed them a loaded gun. Thank God you ripped it up. I want them out, Cashin, I said, my voice steady. I don't want a long drawn-out court battle. I want to surgically remove them from my property before those 5 freeloading friends show up on Monday. Cashin leaned forward, booting up his dual monitors. Let's check the municipal database first. Given your father's background as a city building inspector, I wouldn't put it past him to try something underhanded with the zoning or property lines to leverage against you. His fingers flew across the keyboard. I watched his eyes scan the screen. Suddenly, his typing stopped. He frowned, leaning closer to the monitor. Althea, he said, his tone dead serious. Did you authorize any structural modifications to your property in the last 30 days? What? No. Absolutely nothing, I replied, confusion washing over me. Cashin turned the monitor so I could see. Displayed on the screen was an official municipal zoning and construction permit application. It was filed under the address of my coastal home. 2 weeks ago, an application was submitted to the city planning department, Cashin read aloud, his voice tight. It requests permission to fundamentally alter the load-bearing walls on the second floor, specifically targeting the master suite. The plan is to convert the bedroom and adjacent bathroom into a 2-story, open-concept studio space. Estimated construction cost is $75,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands gripped the armrests of the leather chair so hard my knuckles turned white. Who filed it? I whispered, though I already knew the answer. Gideon, Cashin confirmed, pointing to the applicant name. He used his old municipal inspector credentials to bypass the standard preliminary review. And look here at the bottom. Cashin zoomed in on a digital signature box. There, clear as day, was my name. Althea. I never signed that, I said, my voice shaking with a terrifying mix of rage and disbelief. That is forgery. The irony of the situation was a bitter pill to swallow. I was a marine logistics coordinator. I dealt with international freight contracts, customs declarations, and multi-million-dollar liability clauses every single day. I was an expert at finding the loopholes in complex legal jargon. And here was my own father, a retired building inspector, using his specialized knowledge of municipal bureaucracy to forge my signature and secretly remodel my house to suit my sister's influencer delusions. He was planning to tear down the walls of my bedroom the moment I left for that hostel. They were not just trying to push me out. They were trying to erase me from the physical structure of my own home. This upgrades the situation from a civil family dispute to a criminal matter, Cashin stated flatly, his lawyer instincts fully engaged. Forgery on a municipal document is a felony. Using his old badge credentials to fast-track it is fraud. We have them, Althea. We have them completely dead to rights. I don't want to just call the cops right now, I said, my mind working at 1,000,000 miles an hour. If I call the police now, they will just play the victim. Rowena will cry, Gideon will claim he was just trying to help improve the property value, and Vesper will post a crying video on social media about how her evil sister kicked them out onto the street. They will spin the narrative. So, what is the plan? Cashin asked, leaning back in his chair, a dangerous smile playing on his lips. The plan, I said, standing up, is to let them dig their graves exactly 6 feet deep. They want to play games with access and authority? I am going to show them what absolute control looks like. I need you to draft the most aggressive, bulletproof eviction notice the law allows. Have it ready for Monday afternoon. Consider it done, Cashin said. What are you going to do this weekend? I smiled, though there was no joy in it. I am going to build a fortress. By the time I drove back to the coastal house, it was mid-afternoon. I pulled up the gravel driveway and parked down the street, intentionally avoiding Gideon's massive truck that was still blocking my spot. As I walked up to the front porch, I checked the shared family calendar on my phone. Rowena had scheduled a mother-daughter spa day for her and Vesper, completely funded by the secondary credit card I had originally given them for emergency groceries. Gideon was tagged along to go play golf at a local municipal course. The house was empty. The timing was flawless. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The silence was golden, but it would not last long. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had saved in my contacts for 3 years. Theron Security Solutions, a deep, gravelly voice answered on the second ring. Theron, it is Althea, I said, my voice crisp and commanding. I need an emergency perimeter lockdown and hardware upgrade. Primary residence. All exterior access points. Today. Theron was an independent security contractor I had met during a warehouse audit years ago. He was a man of very few words, heavily tattooed, incredibly efficient, and discreet. He didn't ask questions about domestic drama, he just secured perimeters. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Theron replied, and hung up. While I waited, I opened my laptop on the kitchen island and began the digital lockdown. I logged into my banking portal. The secondary credit card that Vesper was currently using at the spa, I clicked the freeze button. Access denied. I moved all the funds from the shared emergency house maintenance account directly into a private, high-yield offshore savings account under my name only. Next, I logged into the home network router. I changed the Wi-Fi password from Summer Vibes to a randomized string of 24 alphanumeric characters. I disabled the guest network entirely. Let Vesper try to upload her high-definition vlogs using her limited cellular data. Exactly 20 minutes later, a heavy-duty black work van backed into my driveway. Theron stepped out, carrying 2 massive Pelican cases of equipment. He didn't smile, just gave me a curt nod as he walked up the steps. "What are we looking at?" he asked, setting the heavy cases down on the hardwood floor. "Total access revocation," I instructed, pointing to the front door, the back patio sliders, the garage side entry, and the master bedroom door. "Remove every mechanical deadbolt. I want military-grade biometric locks on all exterior doors. Fingerprint and retinal scan combination for the front. High-security digital keypads on the rest. I want the master access codes randomized and known only to me. And Theron? Make sure the physical strike plates are reinforced with steel deep into the door frames. Nobody kicks these doors in." Theron just grunted in approval, popping the latches on his cases to reveal rows of sleek, heavy metal hardware. Smart move. Standard mechanical locks are a joke anyway. Give me 3 hours. I spent those 3 hours pacing the house, watching the transformation. Instead of telling you how satisfying it was, I wish you could hear the sounds. The high-pitched whine of Theron's industrial drill biting into the wooden door frames. The heavy, metallic clack of the old brass locks being violently ripped out and tossed into a scrap bucket. The solid, heavy thud of the new steel-reinforced deadbolts sliding into place. It was the sound of a drawbridge being pulled up. Theron moved with methodical precision. He installed a sleek, black biometric scanner on the main front door. He wired hidden, high-definition micro cameras into the porch light fixtures and the back patio eaves, feeding directly to a secure server on my phone. By 6 in the evening, the house was a digital fortress. Theron handed me a tablet to register my biometrics. I pressed my thumb against the cool glass scanner. It beeped, a sharp, validating sound, flashing a green light. "You are the sole administrator," Theron said, packing up his tools. "If anyone tries to pry the casings off, or enters an incorrect code 3 times, it triggers an instant silent alarm to your phone and drops a secondary steel pin into the door frame. They would need a battering ram to get through." "Perfect. Thank you, Theron," I said, handing him an envelope with his payment in cash, plus a hefty tip for the rush job. After he drove away, I stood in the center of the foyer, looking at the glowing blue ring of the new lock on the front door. I had physically secured the perimeter, but the mental warfare was just beginning. I checked my phone. I had 5 missed calls from Rowena and 2 from Vesper. I listened to the first voicemail. It was Vesper, her voice bordering on hysterical. "Althea, your stupid credit card got declined at the spa." I was standing in front of the receptionist with mud on my face and it declined. "Fix it right now, this is so embarrassing." I smiled, deleting the message with a single swipe. The financial tap was officially shut off. I knew they would be coming home soon, furious about the card, ready to scream and yell and demand I fix their problems. But I wasn't going to fight them tonight. I was going to let them back in. I was going to let them sleep in the guest rooms, let them eat my food one last weekend, let them think they still had the upper hand. Because the real punishment wasn't kicking them out on a random Friday night. The real punishment was letting Vesper's elaborate lie completely unravel in front of her paying audience. I wanted to see the look on her face when her friends arrived with their luggage, expecting a luxurious summer villa, only to find a locked fortress and a very angry homeowner. I walked over to the front door, temporarily disabling the biometric requirement, and set a temporary numerical code. I texted it to Gideon with a simple message: "Upgraded the security system today. Here is the temp code for the weekend." The trap was set. The bait was laid. Now, all I had to do was wait for Monday afternoon. This is where the real fun begins. Have you ever had to physically lock a toxic family member out of your life? Let me know your story in the comments. And if you are ready for the ultimate downfall of the golden child, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. The weekend passed in a bizarre, suffocating haze. When Gideon, Rowena, and Vesper had returned on Friday night, they were practically shaking with rage over the declined credit card. They cornered me in the kitchen, Vesper screaming that I had humiliated her in front of the spa staff. I played it perfectly. I widened my eyes, acted shocked, and blamed it on a bank fraud alert. I told them the bank had frozen the account for 48 hours to investigate suspicious activity, and there was nothing I could do until Monday. Gideon grumbled, Rowena sighed, and Vesper threw a tantrum, but they bought it. They were too arrogant to believe I would actually cut them off on purpose. They still thought they had the upper hand. They still thought I was packing my bags. Sunday morning arrived with a heavy, humid stillness. The kind of weather that makes your skin prickle before a massive thunderstorm. Vesper was in a manic state of excitement. She spent the entire morning strutting around the house in a matching designer sweatsuit, barking orders at Unia over the phone, finalizing the itinerary for her paying guests. I played my part flawlessly. I went to the local hardware store and bought a stack of heavy-duty cardboard moving boxes. I dragged them through the front door, making sure to make as much noise as possible. I carried them up the stairs, past the guest rooms, and into my master suite. Vesper was standing in the hallway, sipping a green smoothie. She watched me haul the boxes, a smug, victorious smirk playing on her lips. "Make sure you clear out the walk-in closet completely, Althea," she said, not even trying to hide her satisfaction. "My friends are bringing a lot of wardrobe changes for the shoots. Oh, and leave the good hangers. The velvet ones. I hate the plastic ones." I stopped on the landing, looking down at her. I did not scream. I did not throw the cardboard box at her head. I just gave her a tight, polite smile. "Of course, Vesper," I said softly. "I will make sure everything is exactly where it belongs." She rolled her eyes and went back to texting. She had no idea what that sentence actually meant. I spent the entire Sunday afternoon in my master suite with the door locked. But I was not packing my clothes. My clothes stayed exactly where they were, hanging neatly in my closet. Instead, I waited until Vesper and my parents left for a long, celebratory dinner in town. The moment their car pulled out of the driveway, I went to work. I moved with the speed and precision of a military operation. I took the empty cardboard boxes and headed straight for the guest rooms. I started with Vesper's room. It was a disaster zone of discarded clothes, makeup wipes, and half-empty water bottles. I did not bother folding anything. I grabbed armfuls of her cheap fast fashion dresses, her expensive shoes paid for with my money, her ridiculous ring lights, and shoved them all into heavy black trash bags. I cleared off the vanity. I stripped the bed. I packed up every single trace of her existence in that room. Next was my parents' room. I was slightly more careful with their belongings, only because Gideon owned a few heavy tools he kept in his closet, and I did not want to tear the bags. I packed Rowena's flowing skirts and Gideon's golf shirts. By 11 o'clock at night, the guest wing was entirely empty. It looked exactly as it had 6 months ago, before the invasion. Pristine, quiet, and mine. But I could not just leave their bags sitting in the hallway. That would ruin the surprise. I needed them off the main property entirely. Down at the edge of my property, right where the rocky cliff met the private beach, sat an old, weathered boathouse. I had not used it since I bought the place. It was damp, smelled heavily of sea salt and old wood, and was covered in thick green moss. It was structurally sound, but it was not exactly a luxury suite. It was the perfect holding cell. At 1 in the morning, under the cover of a cloudy night sky, the physical labor began. I dragged 12 massive, heavy trash bags and 3 suitcases down the steep, gravel path to the boathouse. My arms burned, my lungs ached from the salt air, and my hands were blistered by the time I finished. But with every heavy bag I dropped onto the cold concrete floor of the boathouse, a piece of the crushing weight on my chest lifted. I locked the boathouse with a heavy padlock and trudged back up the hill. I took a long, hot shower in my master bathroom, letting the water wash away the sweat and the grime of the last 6 months. I put on my most comfortable silk pajamas, the ones I only wore on special occasions, and climbed into my bed. I reached over to my nightstand and picked up my phone. It was exactly 2 in the morning. I opened the security app for the new locks Theron had installed. The interface glowed brightly in the dark room. I navigated to the User Management tab. There, listed under Temporary Access, were the 3 numerical codes I had generated for Gideon, Rowena, and Vesper. My thumb hovered over the screen. I thought about the $15,000. I thought about the ruined model ships. I thought about the forged municipal documents trying to tear down my walls. I tapped the screen. Delete user. A prompt popped up. Are you sure you want to permanently revoke access for this user? I tapped confirm. I did it 3 times. The codes vanished from the screen. The digital drawbridge was officially raised. The moat was filled. The fortress was sealed. I set my phone face down on the nightstand, closed my eyes, and for the first time in 28 years, I slept through the night without a single nightmare. Monday morning broke with brilliant, blinding sunshine. It was the kind of perfect summer day that real estate agents used to sell coastal properties. The ocean was a sparkling, crystal blue, and a gentle breeze blew through the pine trees. The house was completely silent when I woke up. I walked downstairs, fully expecting a confrontation, but the guest rooms were still empty. I checked the driveway. The cars were gone. I found a sticky note on the kitchen island, written in Rowena's looping handwriting. Althea, we left early to grab breakfast and then head straight to the airport to pick up Vesper's friends. We will be back around 2 in the afternoon. Please make sure you are gone by then. Leave the front door unlocked. Love, Mom. I read the note, crumpled it up into a tiny ball, and tossed it into the trash can. Leave the front door unlocked. The sheer entitlement was almost comical. I had exactly 5 hours until 0 hour. I did not spend them panicking. I spent them reclaiming my space. I opened every single window on the main floor, letting the fresh, salty ocean air flush out the lingering smell of Vesper's floral perfume and Gideon's heavy cologne. I ran the vacuum over the hardwood floors. I wiped down the granite countertops until they shined. I reset the central thermostat to a comfortable, energy-efficient 72 degrees. By 1 in the afternoon, the house was immaculate. It looked like a magazine cover. I took a shower, washing my hair carefully. I dressed in a sharp, tailored pair of black linen trousers and a crisp white silk blouse. I wanted to look professional, untouchable, like the executive I was. I slid my feet into a pair of expensive leather loafers. I put on a light layer of makeup, just enough to accentuate the cold, unbothered look in my eyes. At 1:30, I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on. I brewed a pot of Earl Grey tea, pouring it into my favorite bone china cup. I walked into the living room and connected my phone to the high-end surround sound speakers. I selected a playlist of smooth, classic John Coltrane jazz. The deep, rich notes of the saxophone filled the empty house, creating a bizarrely calm atmosphere. I carried my tea to the front foyer. My front door was a massive, heavy oak piece, but it had a tall, narrow panel of reinforced, frosted glass running down the side. You could not see details clearly through it, but you could see shapes, colors, and movement. More importantly, anyone standing on the porch could see the silhouette of someone standing inside. I pulled up a high-backed wooden chair, placed it right in the center of the foyer, directly facing the front door. I sat down, crossed my legs, rested my teacup on my knee, and waited. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly, syncing perfectly with the jazz music. 1:45. 1:50. Exactly at 2 o'clock, the crunch of heavy tires on gravel broke through the music. I did not move an inch, but my heart beat a little faster. Not out of fear, but out of pure, unadulterated anticipation. Through the frosted glass panel, I saw the distorted shapes of two large vehicles pulling into the driveway. One was Gideon's truck, the other looked like a rented passenger van. Doors slammed. Multiple voices, high-pitched and excited, drifted through the thick wood of the door. "Oh my God, it is gorgeous," a girl's voice shrieked. "Vesper, you did not tell us it was literally right on the water." "This is insane," another voice yelled. I could hear the wheels of heavy suitcases rolling across the paved walkway leading up to the porch. They were coming up the steps. "Right? I told you guys it was the perfect summer villa," Vesper's voice rang out, loud and dripping with arrogant pride. She was practically shouting, definitely performing for an audience. "Just wait until you see the master suite. It has a panoramic balcony. Let me just get the door open." I think my sister finally cleared out. I took a slow, calm sip of my Earl Grey tea. A shadow fell over the frosted glass. Vesper stepped up to the lock. I could hear her tapping the glass screen of her phone, likely checking that her live stream was running perfectly. "Okay guys, welcome to the summer villa," Vesper announced to her followers. I heard the distinct, metallic beep of her pressing the first number on the keypad. Beep, 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 beep. She paused, expecting the heavy mechanical click of the deadbolt retracting. Instead, the lock emitted a harsh, low-pitched buzz. A bright red light flashed, reflecting off the frosted glass. "Access denied." "Hold on, let me try again." "Must have typed it wrong," Vesper muttered, her voice losing a tiny fraction of its confidence. Beep, 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 buzz. Red light. "What is wrong with this thing?" Vesper snapped, her tone turning irritable. She started hitting the numbers harder. Beep, 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 beep. Buzz. "Dad," Vesper yelled over her shoulder. "The temporary code you gave me isn't working. Come open the door." Heavy footsteps stomped up the wooden stairs. Gideon's massive shadow loomed next to Vesper's. "Move over, let me do it. You probably locked us out by pressing the wrong button." Gideon punched in the code with his thick fingers. Buzz. Red light. He tried again. Buzz. "What the hell?" Gideon growled, rattling the heavy brass handle. The door did not even budge a millimeter. The steel pins therein had installed held it tighter than a bank vault. Outside, the excitement of the five friends began to curdle into awkward confusion. Vesper? Are we locked out?" one of the girls asked nervously. No, of course not," Vesper said, her voice pitching up in panic. "The lock is just glitching. It is brand new." She began pounding her fist against the thick oak wood. Althea, are you in there? Open the door. Stop playing games." I sat in my chair, the jazz music playing softly behind me, the warm teacup in my hands. I watched their distorted shadows frantically moving across the glass. They were trapped on the outside, standing in the bright, hot sun with all their luggage, looking like absolute fools in front of the people they had tried to scam. I did not answer. I let them panic for a full 3 minutes. I let the embarrassment marinate. I let the reality of their situation slowly dawn on them. Then, I put my teacup down, stood up, and slowly walked toward the glass. As I stepped closer to the frosted glass panel, my silhouette became sharply defined to the people outside. Vesper saw me first. She stopped pounding on the door and slammed her hand against the glass instead. "Althea, I see you in there," she screamed, her voice muffled but frantic. "Open this door right now. My friends are out here. It is boiling hot. Stop being a psychopath and let us in." Rowena pushed her way to the front, her shadow joining the chaos. She tapped frantically on the glass, her voice pleading. "Althea, honey, please. This isn't funny. Open the door. You're embarrassing us in front of the guests." Guests? They were still clinging to the delusion. I did not speak. I knew they would not be able to hear me clearly through the reinforced glass and the solid oak anyway. I wanted this to be a purely visual execution. I reached into the pocket of my blazer and pulled out the crisp, white document Cashin had delivered to me that morning. It was the formal, legally binding 30-day notice of eviction, citing unauthorized commercial use of the property and attempted fraud. But it was not just a standard letter-size paper. Cashin had thoughtfully printed it on a massive, A3-sized cardstock, with the words Notice of Eviction and Trespass printed in bold, red, 3-inch letters at the very top. I held the document up, pressing it flat against the inside of the frosted glass panel. The silence on the porch was immediate and deafening. I could see Vesper lean in close to read the heavy black text. I watched as her posture completely collapsed. The phone in her hand, which was still recording her live stream, slowly dropped to her side. Gideon read it over her shoulder. He stepped back as if the glass had suddenly caught fire. "You have got to be kidding me," Unia's grating voice filtered through. "Vesper, what does that mean? Eviction? I thought you owned this place. You said this was your family's summer home." "It is," Vesper shrieked, spinning around to face her friends, absolute panic contorting her features. "She is just my crazy, jealous sister. She is having a mental breakdown." Vesper turned back to the door. Her face was dark red, completely consumed by the humiliation of being exposed as a fraud in front of her paying audience. She lost whatever tiny shred of sanity she had left. She looked around the porch frantically, grabbed a heavy, decorative ceramic planter I kept near the railing, and hoisted it above her head. "Open the door or I am smashing this window," she screamed, her voice tearing at the seams. I did not flinch. I just stood there, looking at her through the glass, my face entirely devoid of emotion. I knew Theron had installed shatterproof ballistic glass. She could hit it with a sledgehammer, and it would only crack. But she didn't get the chance to find out. Because right at that exact second, the wail of a police siren cut through the salty ocean air, loud and piercing. A white and blue police cruiser swung into my driveway, its lights flashing brilliantly in the afternoon sun. It pulled up aggressively, blocking the rental van from leaving. And right behind the police cruiser, a sleek black Mercedes sedan pulled in. The doors opened. 2 uniformed officers stepped out of the cruiser, their hands resting casually on their utility belts. From the Mercedes stepped Cashin. He was wearing a sharp, charcoal gray 3-piece suit, carrying a thick leather briefcase. He looked like a shark smelling blood in the water. The 5 friends on the porch completely panicked, grabbing their suitcases and backing away toward the edge of the grass, trying to distance themselves from Vesper and my family. I finally reached out and pressed the biometric scanner on the inside of the door. The heavy steel pins retracted with a loud, mechanical clunk. I pulled the door open and stepped out onto the porch. The hot summer air hit my face, but I felt freezing cold. "Officers," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the murmur of the crowd. "Thank you for arriving so quickly. These people are trespassing on my private property." Vesper dropped the ceramic planter. It shattered on the wooden deck, dirt spilling everywhere. She burst into theatrical, hysterical tears. "She is lying. We live here. We have been living here for 6 months. She can't just lock us out. It is illegal." Gideon puffed out his chest, stepping toward the officers, trying to leverage his old authority. "Listen here, boys. I am Gideon Vance, former city building inspector. This is just a family dispute. My daughter is throwing a tantrum. You don't need to be here." One of the officers held up a hand, stopping Gideon in his tracks. Cashin walked smoothly up the steps, his expensive leather shoes clicking against the wood. He bypassed Gideon entirely and handed a thick folder directly to the lead officer. "Officer, my name is Cashin Hayes. I am the property attorney representing the sole owner, Ms. Althea," Cashin said, his voice dripping with professional authority. "These individuals are indeed guests who have overstayed their welcome. But more importantly, we have evidence of attempted municipal fraud." Gideon froze. The color instantly drained from his face, leaving him looking like a deflated balloon. Cashin turned to face my father, opening his briefcase and pulling out a copy of the forged building permit. He held it up so everyone on the porch could see it. "Gideon," Cashin said, his voice cold and precise. You submitted a structural alteration permit to the city planning department 2 weeks ago. You bypassed the standard review using your expired credentials, and you forged my client's signature on a legally binding document to secure construction on a property you do not own. Rowena gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. She looked at Gideon in horror. She had known about the plan to take the house, but clearly, Gideon hadn't told her he committed a felony to do it. That is a misunderstanding. Gideon stammered, his former arrogance completely evaporating. I was just drafting plans. I didn't forge anything. The officer looked at the paperwork, then looked at Gideon with a hard stare. Sir, forgery of a municipal document is a felony offense. We can either arrest you right here, right now, while your daughter's friends watch, or you can comply with the eviction notice, remove yourselves from this property, and wait for the district attorney's summons. Gideon's mouth opened and closed. For the first time in my entire life, the great, booming patriarch of the family was completely and utterly silenced. If you have ever dealt with a narcissistic parent, you know the exact expression he had on his face right then. The realization that they have lost control of the narrative. The terrifying understanding that their actions finally have real, legal consequences. If you are loving this legal smackdown as much as I did, take a second to smash that like button. It helps the algorithm push this sweet justice to more people who need to hear it. The silence that followed the officer's threat was thick enough to cut with a knife. The balance of power, which had leaned entirely in their favor for 28 years, flipped in a matter of seconds. But the legal trouble wasn't even the most immediate disaster for Vesper. Unia, the glittery sidekick who had eaten my lunch days prior, pushed her way forward. She looked furious. Wait a minute, Unia snarled, glaring at Vesper. You don't own this house? This isn't your family's summer villa. Vesper was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe, her mascara running down her face in thick black streaks. Unia, please, she is ruining everything. You charged us $1,500 a person, another girl in the group yelled, dropping her designer suitcase on the grass. You said this was your house? You sold us tickets to a house you were squatting in. Give us our money back, Vesper. Unia demanded, stepping right into Vesper's personal space. Right now. Transfer it back on Venmo or I am telling the cops you scammed us. Vesper looked trapped, a cornered animal realizing there was no way out. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and frantically began transferring the money back to the 5 girls. She had spent the last week bragging online about her luxury lifestyle, and now she was being publicly humiliated, exposed as a fraud, and forced to refund thousands of dollars she probably had already spent in her head. The group of girls didn't even wait for the transfers to fully process. They grabbed their bags, shot Vesper looks of absolute disgust, and piled back into the rental van. Unia didn't even look back as she slammed the van door shut. They reversed out of the driveway, kicking up gravel, leaving Vesper completely abandoned by her squad. Rowena was crying silently, clutching her purse to her chest. Gideon stood staring at the wooden deck, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Now, Cashin said smoothly, breaking the miserable silence. As per the eviction notice, you have been legally removed from the premises. Your belongings have already been packed and relocated to the old boathouse at the bottom of the cliff. The padlock code is 1234. I suggest you collect them and leave before the officers decide to run a full background check on that forged permit. Rowena looked up at me, her tear-streaked face a mask of disbelief. Althea, you packed our things? You put them in that dirty old shack? How could you treat your family like this? I looked at the woman who had enabled every single abuse I had ever suffered. You are not my family, I said, my voice quiet, steady, and echoing with absolute finality. You are just guests who overstayed your welcome. The checkout time was noon. I turned my back on them. I walked back inside my beautiful, quiet house. I closed the heavy oak door and pressed my thumb against the scanner. The steel pins slid into place with a loud, satisfying thud. Through the frosted glass, I watched their shadows slowly turn away. I watched my arrogant father, my manipulative mother, and my golden child sister drag their feet across the grass, heading toward the steep, rocky path down to the moldy boathouse to collect their garbage bags full of clothes. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I walked into the living room, sat down on my pristine $4,000 Italian leather sofa, picked up my teacup, and listened to the jazz music play. For the first time in my life, the air in my lungs felt entirely my own. 3 months have passed since that day on the porch. Cashin followed through on his threat. He filed a formal complaint with the city regarding the forged building permit. Gideon wasn't sent to prison, but he was hit with massive municipal fines and a permanent mark on his record that effectively destroyed whatever consulting work he had left in the city. My parents had to take out a high-interest personal loan to pay back the remaining money Vesper owed her friends, because she had already spent half of it on designer clothes for the trip. Vesper's social media career died overnight. The girls she invited went online and exposed the entire scam. They posted videos of her getting locked out and crying on the porch. The internet did what the internet does best. It tore her apart. She deleted all her accounts and is currently working as a barista in a neighboring town, living in a tiny apartment with our parents. I haven't spoken a single word to them. They're blocked on my phone, my email, and all social media. Occasionally, I get a letter in the mail from Rowena, usually a mix of guilt-tripping and vague apologies, telling me that I destroyed the family and that I am a cold, heartless monster for putting my own flesh and blood on the street. I run those letters straight through the paper shredder. I sit on my deck every morning, drinking my dark roast coffee, looking out at the ocean. The house is quiet. The bills are low. The furniture is clean. I finally have the peace I worked so hard to build. But society has a funny way of making you question your own survival tactics. People tell you that family is everything. They tell you that blood is thicker than water and that you should always forgive, no matter how many times they break you. They say that kicking your parents and sister out of a massive house just to live alone is selfish. So, I am leaving it up to you, the jury of the internet. Tell me the truth. Am I the monster they say I am? Was I wrong to barricade my dream home and lock my toxic family out in the cold? Let me know exactly what you think down in the comments. I read every single one of them. Thank you so much for watching my story until the end. If you enjoyed this heavy dose of family karma, please do me a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. Until next time, stay strong, protect your peace, and never let anyone make you feel bad for defending your own castle.